Hello and welcome to India Ascends, a show that gets you all that matters from the world of global politics, economics and technology through the lens of India. I'm Gaurie Dwivedi. Let's get started with headlines. Tensions in West Asia continue after Iran vows to retaliate after Israel assassinated the political chief of Hezbollah and the military chief of Hamas. The region remains tense, oil prices spike. How will this impact India, and will this affect New Delhi's fine balancing act in the region? It's the week of biggest monetary policy overload for global investors. Bank of England cut rates. US Fed has announced plans to cut rates from September. Will emerging markets like India be the biggest beneficiary of global capital inflows? Indian equity markets hit record highs as investors look to regions that offer better returns. Is the US receding its geopolitical space and getting consumed with its domestic political cycle? From Palestine to Ukraine, China is now getting into global conflicts as a mediator. What does this mean for the world, and how will this change China's existing conflicts with other nations? India aims to address increasing climate disasters and calamities with a new legislation. The bill envisages separate disaster management authority to be created for state capitals and cities, along with a comprehensive disaster database that will improve response and reduce damage. And India and Vietnam signed 6 MOUs and have adopted an action plan to broad-based cooperation and ensure rules-based Indo-Pacific. Vietnamese Prime Minister was on a bilateral visit to India. New Delhi has also extended a $300 million credit line to Vietnam for enhancing maritime security. The big story this week, the tensions in the Middle East that could possibly flare up. Now, how does this affect India? Just how significant is this region for us? And how big a player is India in the Middle East? And most importantly, will this affect India's fine diplomatic balance? Middle East is the world's most polarized, most bifurcated region. Tensions have been escalating, and it could escalate further between Israel and Iran in recent days after Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh's assassination. Before we go any further, let's listen in to the voices that matter. First, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and then a response from Iranian Speaker of Parliament.
לאחר שחיסלנו שלשום את רמטכ"ל חיזבאללה, מוחסן, היום הגיע העימות הסופי לחיסולו של רמטכ"ל חמאס, מוחמד דף. דף היה אחראי לטבח הנורא של ה-7 באוקטובר, וגם לפיגועים רצחניים רבים נגד אזרחי ישראל. הוא היה מבוקש מספר אחד של ישראל במשך שנים, והחיסול שלו מקבע עיקרון פשוט שקבענו. מי שפוגע בנו, אנחנו פוגעים בו.
דורان بزن و در رو تمام شده. این رو ما در عمل نشان داده ایم. ما حواسمون هست، میدانیم که همه این مسئولیت ها و این حوادث به عهده آمریکای جنایتکار هست. هیچ اتفاقی بدون هماهنگی و بدون حمایت آمریکای جنایتکار اتفاق نمیفته.
Now, in this region, India has been very successful in building bridges with rival countries. Now, historically, Middle East has been a source of oil imports for India. It contributes a large chunk of our foreign remittances, but there's a lot more to this than just that. India now has a very diversified economic exchange with several countries, deep security cooperation with most players, in fact, all of them. First is the diplomatic initiatives it's forged, like the I2U2, Israel, India, US, UAE partnership, and the India-Middle East Europe Economic Corridor. Both provide significant strategic and economic depth to India in this region. Though they are still in their initial stages, they could actually become very significant. I2U2 could become a possible quad for the region. IMEEC, which is the corridor, has the potential to become a major investment vehicle like the Belt and Road. but without its debt trappings. Now, add to this the increased economic engagements that India has in the region with UAE, Qatar, and several others. Then there are the combined exercises, the air, naval, army exercises with the Emirates, with Oman. Then there are multilateral naval exercises with Qatar, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia. And what one gets together is a very deep strategic engagement with all players in the Middle East. And the earlier piecemeal approach towards approaching every country with a specific agenda has now been replaced with a much more strategic push. India has also been at the forefront of tackling some of the biggest threats in this region, whether it's the Somalian pirates in the Gulf of Aden or the Houthi rebels that attack commercial shipping lines in the Red Sea. India is not a fringe player in the Middle East. It has successfully navigated the complex geopolitical and geo-religious landscape of this entire region. One where we've displayed our strategic autonomy, we've charted our independent path, we haven't aligned with any particular country, forged deep ties with rival countries, Shia major Iran, and invested heavily in its arch rival, which is Israel, by building and forging defense relationships. But the escalation of the present conflict could affect some of this strategic calculus, like the Chabahar port in Iran, the North-South connectivity project, all of which are very vulnerable to the rise in tensions, which is a likelihood if America comes out in support of Israel. Remember, Iran's cozying up to Pakistan is a message to New Delhi that its cold shoulder to SCO is not going unnoticed. All parties in the Middle East are likely to harden their positions, adopt belligerent postures. And if the present tensions continue, it could impact, as I said, India's fine balancing act, which has allowed New Delhi to not fit into any silos till now. But this could change. Just how much is really the key question. In fact, to talk more on this, we have the first top voice on the show. It's almost a certainty that Iran will retaliate to the assassination of the Hamas military chief and the Hezbollah political chief. It's embarrassing, in fact, for the new Iranian president, Mohammad Pezeshkian, and the supreme leader that it happened at the time of his swearing in when the world was watching. But how significant will the impact be? Could this start a chain reaction for all powers? And is this going to put New Delhi in a bind in terms of affecting its fine balancing act in the region, which it has so successfully navigated? That's exactly what I've asked to the first top voice on the show, Sharon Haskell, who's a member of parliament of Israel. Ms. Haskell, thanks so much for speaking to NDTV. My first question, ma'am, as things stand right now, there is a real possibility that this tension will escalate. What measures is Israel taking to ensure that this remains contained? You don't want a full-blown war, do you?
Well, unfortunately, this is not up to Israel. I mean, you need to understand, for the last 9 months, we were attacked, and we are attacked almost on a daily basis from 5 different fronts. Okay, there's Hamas who's attacking Israel, Hezbollah, the army of Iran from the north attacking us, the army of Iran in Syria and Iraq is attacking us, the army of Iran in Yemen, the Houthis, is attacking us, and Iran is attacking us directly. So Israel has contained a lot where it shouldn't. People were murdered by that. But when you come and you butcher and massacre 12 children who they only wanted to go and play sport, they were playing soccer in the whole atmosphere of the Olympics. This is something that, we cannot accept. This is a red line that cannot be crossed. And so we have retaliated with the person who is responsible for this attack, this monster who has thousands of innocent people blood on his hands. You need to understand, the person who was targeted, Fouad, in Beirut, he was the chief advisor, military advisor for Hezbollah, for Nasrallah. In 1983, he had a key role in murdering 241 Americans. This is a monster, and this is the person who commanded the massacre of 12 innocent children and babies.
Right. So So I'm not getting into the disproportionate or the proportionate retaliation bit, but the fact is that this is now going to lead Iran to also retaliate. Have you considered, or has Israel considered and evaluated the possibility that we are staring at possibly direct intervention by America, and that could mean escalation of a different kind altogether?
So Iran is attacking Israel since the 7th of October in 5 different fronts. We are ready for war. We are ready to defend our people, our children, and our land. And they should be aware of that. Now, Iran has already attacked directly Israel with hundreds of missiles and drones and ballistic missiles. Okay? Try and imagine if India would have been attacked by hundreds of missiles and drones from Pakistan. How would the Indian government react to that? Now, this is a complete declaration of war by Iran, okay? This is the Iranian war that Israel is managing its front line in the last 9 months. But be certain, this is not Israel's war. This is a war of radical Islam against Western civilization. This is a war of those Islamists, Iran, which is not hiding its goal. They want Islamic dominancy worldwide, and that's why they are setting operations and armies with political influence all around the world. Israel is just the front line of Western civilization, people who love democracy, who yearn for freedom, for liberties, for women's rights, for equality. And that war was started by Iran, and we need to understand that this is the main perpetrator. They are the one directing, managing, funding, and in charge of giving those orders.
Sharon, before I ask you the next question, if Pakistan had attacked India, we would have retaliated in no uncertain measures. We defeated them earlier. We would have defeated them if at all any such thing happened at all. Okay, but I want to ask you about the present conflict and also the fact that in America, both presidential candidates want a ceasefire. They want it immediately. Is Israel running out of time?
Absolutely not. The only people that are going to decide when this war is over is the Israeli people. And it will be when we can live here safely in security and peacefully. We are surrounded by murderous enemies who want for our destruction. And so, we are going to be the one who are going to determine when we were able to reach that point where we can live here safely, where my children can go to school and not be worried of being hit by a missile or being murdered by a terrorist. Now, the two presidential nominees, or, they both have the support of Israel, and they both understand that Israel has the right to defend itself. Israel has the right to exist. And in that kind of atmosphere, I think that not enough people really understand the close bond and friendship that we share with America. I mean, Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. It's the only one that shares those values of freedom and equality and freedom of the press and freedom of speech and all of that. Women's rights. And so based on those mutual values and understanding how Iran is the biggest, destabilizing force, it's the biggest funder of terrorism here, they understand what's at stake. And so I know that no matter who's going to be elected, they're going to have our back. They are going to support us.
Sharon Haskell, appreciate you speaking to me on India Ascents. As things stand right now, Air India has suspended its flights to Tel Aviv, explaining just how volatile and fluid the situation is and how immediately it could actually spark into something significant. On that note, we slip into a very short break. Lots more on the other side of India Ascents. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching India Ascents with me, Gaurie Dwivedi. Now, the first wide-angle story on the show, the monetary policy overload that global investors and markets got this week. Bank of Japan hiked rates since they have been abnormally low in the last 15 years. Bank of England cut rates because they've been very high. And the Fed in the US has also indicated that they will do so in September. In the US, a rate cut hasn't happened since March 2020, but it will happen now. And the Fed rate cut impacts everybody. It impacts global markets, future investment outlook, how currencies will behave, and why it matters to us in India as well. We'll come to that, but first up, listen in to what the Fed chief, Jerome Powell, had to say when he announced that there will be a rate cut come September.
Substantially from a peak of 7% to 2.5%. We are strongly committed to returning inflation to our 2% goal in support of a strong economy that benefits everyone. Today, the FOMC decided to leave our policy interest rate unchanged and to continue to reduce our securities holdings. We are maintaining our restrictive stance of monetary policy in order to keep demand in line with supply and reduce inflationary pressures. Growth of consumer spending has slowed from last year's robust pace, but remains solid. Investment in equipment and intangibles has picked up from its anemic pace last year. In the housing sector, investment stalled in the second quarter after a strong rise in the first.
So why does this matter to us? Why does it matter to India, sense? Because this is great news for us. It impacts everything from equity markets to currency to investments to the startup ecosystem and the funding that some of our startups can get. Now, Indian markets celebrated this. Indices jumped to record highs, and this could continue. And I believe there are 4 reasons why it would. First, India is clocking the highest growth rate in the world. It's primed to attract more FDI going forward. Brazil is the only other emerging market that is competing for global flows, but its size is smaller, so it cannot absorb the amount of funds that India can. Third, most importantly, the US markets have already outperformed. There is now worries that US has already entered a slowdown. Walking into the show, the latest numbers for jobs data came and they were disappointing to say the least. US added 114,000 jobs in the last month, which is very low. In fact, 30% lower than the previous month. So that explains that it's entering a slowdown completely. China is already lagging behind. So where does this all money go? It comes to India. And monetary policy action also impacts the Indian rupee. If it becomes stronger, it will encourage capital flows into the country. It will boost our startup ecosystem, which have of late struggled with getting enough funding. A stronger rupee will also improve our purchasing power, making everything cheaper. From crude oil to foreign travel to foreign education, everything will become cheaper. So what happens in these banks, the monetary policy decisions taken by these banks impacts us positively. All right, shifting focus to the second wide-angle story on the show. Everything that Xi Jinping does has image and optics at its very core, and I'll tell you why. That includes furthering the perception that China's non-democratic economic model is in fact better than the Western free capitalist model. And that's the reason why it's actually playing peacemaker on multiple occasions. The latest being the Russia-Ukraine conflict, where China is set to mediate, or it seems like it will. The conflict is already in its 3rd year. There's a serious prospect of a Trump 2.0 administration, and mediation could probably be the best possible outcome. So in comes China, swoops in to mediate, and as Zelensky knows, and so does NATO, that one of the first decisions that a Trump 2.0 administration will be to end the conflict, and which is why China is looking at mediation efforts. For China, meanwhile, the optics are perfect. Messy American politics contrasting with quote-unquote Chinese statecraft. But China has not even condemned Russia till now, so how can it actually be a neutral party in such a settlement? So what I want to say is, very simply, that China is doing this only because it has absolutely nothing to lose, everything to gain. If peace talks fail, Xi Jinping's ironclad relationship with Putin will strengthen further, since any failure of talks will box Putin in further, leaving him with few, possibly no options whatsoever. As I said, everything that Xi Jinping does has his optics and his influence at its very center. Also, this has less to do with peace and more to do with self-interest. China wants to create an alternate world order where it's a dominant force leading other countries that are either despots or dictatorships. and have no qualms about accepting its no strings attached funds. Take a look at where all China has been trying to broker peace. Weeks before the Afghanistan government fell, China tried to act as a negotiator with Taliban. And since then, China has used every opportunity to broker peace. Beijing enters into messy conflicts with two clear objectives. One, to send a message that the present world order, where America has been the primary arbitrator, is now defunct. And second, to promote its illiberal style of state-run capitalist economy. In Afghanistan, Chinese President Xi Jinping and his Russian counterpart Putin rubbed shoulders with the Taliban leadership at the third BRI forum in China in 2023, even though they had not formally recognized the Taliban government. In 2023 itself, China managed to get Saudi Arabia and Iran to bury the hatchet after 7 years, which has affected Israel's security calculus with the prospect of Shiite and Sunni leadership coming together. In 2024, China brought together the 14 factions of Palestinian leadership to form a unity government with a 3-step process which included recognition of the state of Palestine in the UN. And now it's the Russia-Ukraine conflict, where China has already outlined a 6-point peace process, subverting the Global Peace Summit. It remains to be seen if China can achieve lasting peace in any of these conflicts, or it could just be furthering its own interests in geographies where it has for long sought to be a relevant player. So what happens when China becomes a mediator of choice in global conflicts? Can a country that violates international law on land and sea be trusted to be a mediator? Or will China only be driven by its own interests of toppling the rules-based order? And what happens to conflicts where China itself is a party, like all its maritime neighbors in the Indo-Pacific? How does the world wrap around these questions and China as a possible mediator? On to Tech Tracker this week. Why is Bitcoin suddenly racing? Why does the future of the cryptocurrency depend on the political leanings and not about its fungibility? In fact, cryptocurrency is now completely wrapped around which way American politics will go from here, and that has financial implications for the world markets and global investors. Take a look at this report that tells you why politics will determine Bitcoin's present and future. American politics now has a sub-theme and a clear sub-voter base. And that is the Bitcoiners. Donald Trump is now at the center of wooing this class of voters who are rich and growing in number. In fact, Donald Trump had once termed crypto as a scam and a disaster, but has since fallen in love with it, skyrocketing its prices, along with garnering millions of dollars in donations for his campaign. American politics now has a sub-theme and a clear sub-voter base. And that is the Bitcoiners. Donald Trump is now at the center of wooing this class of voters who are rich and growing in number. In fact, Donald Trump had once termed crypto as a scam and a disaster, but has since fallen in love with it, skyrocketing its prices, along with garnering millions of dollars in donations for his campaign. Bitcoin has been around since 2009, and as per a Pew Research study, 17% of American adults under the age of 50 have used Bitcoin. But it's the politics of it that will drive its future and its growth. Those on the right feel Bitcoin is a currency that should exist completely outside of government and taxes like capital gains tax. leftists feel Bitcoin is a stock and not a currency, and ultra-leftists feel Bitcoin is all about evasion of taxes and therefore should be scrutinized more. This explains the Democrats' cautious stance on the asset class. But regulators around the world continue to be wary and seek a greater security framework for cryptocurrencies in general. Those on the left feel that Bitcoin needs to be regulated. Those on the right feel that this is something that is symptomatic of American enterprise. In fact, biggest Silicon Valley names like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel support Donald Trump because they support cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency is the technological and political expression of what they believe in. It is backed by blockchain technology, which has everything to do with the tech innovation coming out of the West Coast and not from the Securities Exchange Commission. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of India Sense. Thanks so much for watching.